Hi, my name's Duncan Powell. I'm the Group Planning Director for Acorn Property Group. My role, as you would expect, relates to planning, and you can break it down into three different facets. The first would be ensuring at acquisition stage that sites we acquire are robust in planning terms, and they also have plenty of fallbacks because, as people will know, planning is an ever-evolving policy area, and you need to make sure whatever you're acquiring has different ways forward in the event things go differently. The second, and obviously, is to manage all of our planning applications through the planning process. That's from inception right through to permission and Section 106 and legal agreements after that. Thirdly, is to provide a strategic overview to the group about the direction that the country is going in terms of planning policy. As our investments are not just 2-3 years to build out sites, they're to acquire land and a portfolio of assets in the next 10 to 15 years. So a long-term overview, on my view, on where the UK is going in terms of planning policy is absolutely key to ensuring we have a long-term business and investment plan. In terms of why I became a planner and why I chose planning as a profession, it's actually quite a good story, this. I grew up in the Peter Street National Park, or next to it, and I mountain biked from day one of mountain biking. And one day I came back about 14 years old for a long bike ride, and I said to my mum, how does this work? Who's responsible for managing the park? You've got bridleways, you've got motorbikes, mountain bikes, cafes, farm buildings, agriculture, housing, all this stuff. How's that work? Mum said, well, that's planning. Right, good, what's that then? She managed to get me a 2-week work experience placement with the Peter Street National Park Joint Planning Board at the age of 15. Absolutely loved it. In those 2 weeks, I viewed projects through from repatriation of disused railway lines and cycle paths straight through to housing projects in the middle of a very beautiful national park, through to managing the 50 million or so people who live within an hour of the national park. And I really enjoyed the conflicting aspects of planning and how to manage those and the influence that planners actually have, because all of us live in homes, all of us work in buildings or thereabouts. All those aspects, everything in the built environment has gone through planning at some point, and to be able to influence that was fascinating, it was wonderful. So from then I did business studies, geography and English language A-level. I went to Cardiff University, which was the best planning school in the UK and in Europe, apart from uni. And that was that. I've been a planner ever since, so it's almost my destiny. There have been so many changes in planning in the course of my career, and if I was to pinpoint the biggest change, it's probably the devolution of planning to a local level. So when I started, it was 25 years ago, planning was, no one cared about planning, no one knew about planning, it barely existed. Whereas once government kind of devolved policy to a local level and locals could have more of a say in planning, it has become of interest to everybody. If there's a development anywhere, particularly housing, people will have a voice, will want to talk about it, want to influence it, perhaps because it's one of the last things that can be influenced on a local level. That's created a real mix of issues, both good and bad, because at local level there might be a conflict with policy and politically driven and so on. But that change, that devolution, has been the biggest change I've seen. I think more recently, the drive of the green agenda is also a major aspect. Originally, people didn't really have a view on it. We did at Acorn, we've done a lot of that from early years, but it wasn't really in planning legislation until later on. So I think that devolution is the biggest difference, and the envelopment of society and interest in planning, whereas, let's face it, even now, 10 years ago, no one knew what planning was, never thought, planners, they're pretty dull and boring, what's that for? Kind of now it's coming to the fore. We're a bit different to normal developers or other developers, big PLCs, that sort of thing, in terms of we have an in-house professional team. There's myself with planning, there's others with architecture, with design. So all stages of the planning process and submissions are looked at internally. However, we handle it with each application has a separate consultant team, because that consultant team will be familiar with issues they face with other developments and other law and other policies and so on, which we may not be. So we're utilising that consultant team in terms of their knowledge and their ability to drive things forward. I will manage that consultant team along with managers in each of our offices. And all the way through the process, Acorn will be on top of the planning submission. The reason we're more involved than others is because we're really proud of what we build. And if you can do that through the planning process, and you can make sure what you're doing is right first time, and you can get on site and build it without going around and changing it all, then we get better values, better products is built, we can move on to the next project, and the business model is more efficient. And we genuinely do love what we do. So planning meetings can turn from the policy and the driven aspects of it and how we bring that forward straight to which way a door swings on a planning drawing, because that's important in terms of sales. Anyone who's been witness of any media or read any articles in the last few years will be aware that planning's very fluid at the moment in this country and faces many challenges. We've seen that you've got constantly evolving politics, you've got politically driven decisions, you've got a complete lack of funding and resource in central government, you've got planning policy changing pretty much every few months, and no one's really sure what they're doing in terms of government direction. You've then got greater influence at local level and more interest, which is a good and a bad thing. And essentially, planning's all over the place. Now, this could come across as quite negative, and people might worry about this. And a lot of people who are investing in applications and moving things forward are concerned about how fluid planning is. To us, that's an opportunity. People will always need homes. People will always need places to live, places to work, places to be educated, all the infrastructure, places to travel. Development will happen, regeneration will happen, buildings need replacing. On that basis, it doesn't really matter if policy is all over the place, because good schemes coming forward, done rightly, will be approved. All of our schemes we were proud of. Everything we're doing now in the future has got all sorts of different aspects to it, all sorts of ways forward we could use. If policy goes in one direction, we can follow that, or we can bring a different direction. For example, one of our largest schemes in Exeter, in the first meeting we had with the council, we sat down and said, this is your design guide that requires X amount of garden space, X amount of driveway and so on. This is built around 1980s housing standards. We're not going to accord with this at all, right at the outset. We're going to do something far better, innovative, interesting, forward-thinking. That scheme is now on site, being built. It was approved first time at committee, and people love it. And we will always do that. We will always push forward in planning, making sure we've got a solid policy background. But if policy changes, we can react to it, or we can often preempt it. The green agenda and its influence in terms of helping planning submissions has been something we've actually been doing for a long time at Acorn. For example, in 2009, a lot of the developments we built in Newquay are running off communal ground source heat pumps. Way before it was fashionable, way before it was marketed, and way before people were doing it. Does this help in terms of planning submissions? Yes, it does now, because there's a lot more policy brought out which encourages use of greener materials, of the green agenda, of better heating systems and so on. We do that anyway because it's the right thing to do, and because we want the purchase of our properties to live in future-proof houses. Also, bluntly, because it helps the sales. Having a product which is very efficient is good in sales terms. I do think that there is a greater focus in planning authorities on this matter now. I think where you've got an application like ours that sits there with all this future-proof building materials and so on, that will get the attention it deserves, as opposed to a run-of-the-mill scheme with basic stuff that's almost outdated. So can I point to evidence saying it influences it? No, not directly. Does it influence it? Yes, undoubtedly. Planning officers in local authorities want to approve the best schemes. They want to approve efficient schemes. They want to approve well-designed, bespoke, design-led schemes, because in the end of it, local authorities are signing off what's being built. They don't want to see poor applications. They want to see stuff like ours, which is really, really good, and they can be proud of it. There's so many aspects of my role I really enjoy, but the absolute best is seeing people living in what we build. You see families, you see people going to work, you see kids playing, and that's in something you've built, you've got permission for, your firm has built, and that can't make me more proud.